So we've got some tech folks. So Carl is Tech Solutions Lead for BIM Track. Carl Storms has over 20 years of experience in the architecture, engineering, and construction world. He shares a practical and well-rounded understanding of BIM with his clients. He works in residential and commercial architecture as well as construction with 10 years of teaching experience at both the collegiate and industry level. This experience helps him to provide the business case for BIM, which we're all excited to hear about, and how it makes the most of collaboration, coordination, and design tools and processes. So with Carl up here on my right is Peter Costanzo, who's the FMP Director for related to facility management with IMAGINiT Technologies. So Peter is, he's worked for IMAGINiT for over 14 years and has, within the sort of facility management division, he has a unique blend of experience in hardware, software, mobility platforms, building information modeling, and facility management applications. Have you talked to Larry?
No, but I need to.
Yes, you really do.
I'm supposed to have lunch with him, but
So he works with his clients to craft solutions that meet both current and future facility management needs. Peter's a proponent of technical applications for building information modeling within facility management and has a whole bunch of very impressive academic credentials that I'm sure you can ask him about afterwards. So guys, over to you. I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We'll try to get into this mic. Short little guys up here.
Good morning. I'm the better looking one, by the way, right?
He's completely
Mars,
true.
Venus.
So I think we'll start off by talking about the elephant in the room, or in this case, the problem when we're dealing with BIM and FM and how it comes together. Technology is great when it works. So what Marvin the Martian is saying is, where's the kaboom? There's supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom. All right, we'll carry on.
All right, so the problem is there is no earth-shattering kaboom. My name is Peter Costanzo. I'm from New York. So all the owners in the room, raise your hand. If I can do one thing, I want you to be a little more New Yorkish when you're done with this. So there's a lot of more usage of BIM, and I liked what was just commented that the owners need to speak up. I did a presentation last week, and I had a graphic at the end of it, and it's a famous picture of a bunch of guys sitting on a beam in New York City. It's the Empire State Building. The building's still there. So the design data from then is still there. It's useful. But as we talk about BIM, we all want to be anywhere, right? We want to be over here and win-win. And where we are traditionally in the design, construction, build, operate process is down here in lose-lose. We're here in the middle. We want to get up to the top. There's a great benefits for both sides. The architect has a bunch of data. The owner wants the data. The problem is the architect thinks it's a design. It's not a design, it's data. So you need to talk to the data people at your clients, not design and construction, but you go down and you find Larry with the name on his shirt and you walk around with him for a day and yes, what's important. But as we're looking, part of what I want to get to you today is to get the perception change that we're just talking about data here. The AEC world sees it as one thing. The owner sees it as something else. At the end of the world, it's still data. We do a lot of surveys around this, and Carl and I had a bunch of stats, and I'm just putting one. So to IMAGINiT, this was years 5 of our owners' adoption BIM survey. And what we like is that we see 2017 was a little anomaly, but in the middle, we look, where are we? And we can see that overall people are requiring BIM more. Last year, we added a question and asked if they never were. And it was surprising the number of people that came back and said never. And the irony is, as a building's built, you guys want that data. Someone used the example of 100 years for a building. I love talking to universities because universities will have buildings that are hundreds of years old. But the data that is in them is going to be important to you.
So on the AEC side, I'm sure we've all seen something similar to this graph. I saved you the parallel of the Macclellan curve this time. I know we've all seen that before. But what this kind of brings into place is what we do, where we spend our dollars when we're working on a design. So of course we've got that first dollar. We've got the little BIM in the room when we're doing a design, we put it in place. And then that brings in the actual time that we're assembling. So we get into the BAM to put it into place. But really what it comes to is when we look back to our friend Marvin, which is kabam! And we've got that big thing and everybody's awake now.
Kaboom?
We're all back awake. But we see that the major amount of money that we put into this is actually at the owners and operations stage. We're putting it into place. So we need to start thinking on the AEC side is how do we tap into some of that? And how do we make sure that the owners that we're working with, that they have the best building, the best ability that they can go forward with all of that information. And as Peter says, that all comes back to the idea of having the data. So this slide here, and as Peter said on the full-blown version of this presentation, which you all have access to at the end, there's a lot more stats, but this one really spoke to me. It's from the University of Toronto, or the TMC Annual Survey that just came out, the third one in December. And we can kind of see what's going on here, what's happening, and it ties into what Peter showed there with the IMAGINiT survey, is that over the course of time between 2018 and 2019, when you take a look at some of these stats, that we're getting that positive increase, that people at least understand what building information modeling is, how it's going to play a benefit for all those involved. And my sort of favorite is you look at the very end there and you see, is it going to have a benefit to our operations and maintenance as we're working our way through? And I think 86% is a pretty good number. It's not the 92, the 96 that we see in the other categories, but the idea is that we're starting to understand, and on the AEC side, we're pushing that information and the fact that we see the benefit in designing the building, we see the benefit in building the building, and we're taking that information and we're passing it along to the owners, and they're starting to understand the benefit of that data that was put into creating it for the life cycle of that entire project. So as we start working through that, the idea, and one of the problems that we come in when we're looking and focusing at the data, is the idea that we have all of these people, and we've all heard it, we've all said it before, working in these silos. So we all have this information, we're sharing this information as it flies all over our job sites. Hopefully we'll have less and less paper, but even 10,000 PDFs that have 60 different names don't make this process any easier as we're working our way through. So we're going through the process, we're sharing our information, we're passing it back and forth, and eventually, Armageddon comes into place and stuff's going everywhere and we have no idea what's going on. So the idea is that we want to be able to have everybody on the same page. So we have all of that information, all of that data that we've harvested from the very beginning when we were doing our conceptual design models, bring it all the way together to when we're actually doing our working documents, to when we get into actually building the documents, and we have everything together. And when we start to get the owners involved in that process, and we have the ability to bring them into that hub and share all that information early on, it makes the whole life cycle that much easier as we go along. And we've talked about data a lot, so I just want to be clear before we go any farther. This is data, and this is data. They're different.
And if I could expound on that briefly, perception as we talk about this is important. So I love it when I hear someone from the UK speak something about the accent, or maybe it's all the British people I know are extremely smart. But they've really thought about the process of what to do with the data and the data flow. They're well far ahead of a lot of the rest of us, but I like the comment that there were no acronyms. So in the PowerPoint version of this, there's an acronym slide. But the fact that if you talk about the data, you make it in consumable pieces so parties can understand, so you can work together. As we talk about data, and in this, I'm going to shamelessly plug the solutions I sell because I've worked with them specifically. They're not special, but as we talk about this, when we talk about BIM, generally we kind of think we're talking about Revit, right? Now, so if we look at this, sorry, I forgot I needed to click here. There's a hell of a lot more data out there, and it's going to increase, and it's going to continue to increase, and there are going to be sensors all over the place. So I have a sensor in my pocket now. This is from Apple. It's called an iBeacon. It knows I'm here. I can show you in an app on my phone, okay? And this has nothing to do with buildings. So as we start talking about buildings, we think about assets, but there's going to be a whole host of things that are going to be able to be done as you take not only this facility data, but you start to integrate it with other things. There's a very simple rule in IT. If you have data, someone will find a way to write an algorithm to get information from that. And I loved, again, the example from the keynote when he used the example that they come to us with these data sets saying, hey, is there something you do with that? And he's like, absolutely. In the data world, I have this wonderful slide now. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about what you need as an owner in your BIM model. Oh, I just did it. Building information model. I always joke it's one of my pet peeves, but they're really 3 simple questions. Yes, there goes a kitten. Have you guys, anyone know what that means, fluffy kitten? Oh, there we go. Okay, so, but when I present this to an IT department, they laugh at me because it's so stupid. From a data perspective, you got to think about what data do you need? Okay, so if you're managing a hospital, right, we need to know a certain amount about the facilities and the rooms and the infrastructure, and then we've got to know things about the assets. The next question you ask as you go to create your database is, how are you going to collect it? And again, I see this as one of the places where the UK is very far ahead of us, where they were going cradle to grave, how do we look at this? But as you're moving along, what cracks me up when I talk to a lot of AEC professionals about BIM, they think that the model is populated in a nice little desk somewhere with some engineering software. If someone's putting assets in this room, let's say we wanted to track these lights, right? And we wanted to track them individually, so we're going to put a barcode on them, right? That's not going to get done in the office. That's going to be done by some tradesperson. So second thing is, well, who's going to collect it? And as you look at that, you're going to deal with different types of people that you've been talking about as you watch the data flow. The third question is the best. It's how will it be kept up to date? So every needs assessment I've been in my IT career, we talk about what needs to be done. We get this big, long list of all sorts of things. And my consultant will look across the table separately and go, okay, which of these are you going to keep up to date? And all of a sudden the list gets really short. So 3 things. It's not that difficult. The good news is your IT department actually knows all of this stuff. And as we talk about data moving along, facilities is, I call them the final frontier in terms of IT. They're the last thing to be taken a look at. So I can tell you that 10 years ago, the energy management system would not talk to the room reservation system, which was stupid. Why don't you turn off the energy when you don't need it, right? You had 2 systems. They were proprietary at the time. The IT world that figured that out back in 1985.
So some of the things that we look at, and looking at the crowd in here, a lot of people will understand this, but BIM standards, big bucket that we can put a lot of things in. The idea is that if we understand what we're doing on the AEC side, as far as how I'm putting this together, again, we can take that bucket of information, that bucket of data, and pass that on to the owners in a more organized way. Keeping with the rule of 3, as per my friend Peter here, we have our BIM execution plan. So the big overarching philosophy, the goal, the things that you as your company are going to do in your strategies moving forward. The key thing to keep in mind is that once you spend that day, that week, that month, that year to come up with this execution plan, it's not something to put in a binder and put into a closet and never work with it again. It's got to be a fluid, it's got to be an organic document that's always changing, that's always evolving, and something that you're happy to share. Don't put proprietary stuff in there. Put stuff in there that you can share with those you're working with. We move down to our guidelines. Again, this is very, very simple stuff where we're just trying to understand what it is that our philosophy is. And then our collaborative requirements, where when we're working on a specific project, when we're bringing somebody in and we're working together, what is it that we need to deliver at the end of the project and how are we going to do that? So we keep these things simple. They don't have to be a 35-page document. It can be a 1, 2, 3-page Excel file that's easy to fill in, that you can pass along. And as Peter's saying, simplicity is the key here. As Peter could tell you about owner standards, I'm going to let Peter tell you about owner standards.
Hey, you want to see owner standards? Google it. What's great is everyone's trying to figure this out. So people are very happy to share information. So it's not just like CanBIM has been a tremendous resource to help Canada. As I come, down from the 13th province, I know how to say kind of fit in here. But you've got to come together and get it. So if you're a hospital and you're looking at BIM standards, go see what the VA did down in the States. Go see what they're doing over in the UK. Go see what the Chinese are doing. There's lots of information, and people are open to share their processes. This isn't normal, right? Everyone's stuff is special, kind of.
So, of course, one of the things that's going to come out of this as we're working on the AEC side as the Asbill, that document that we always deliver 100% accurate all the time. this is where we all laugh because we know that's not true. But hopefully with the technology and the idea of passing along this data and taking what we've done, no longer being in our silos and really passing that along, we get a little bit further along where these as-built processes can actually be something that we can share and use as we work our way through, whether it's with using something like Navisworks or any other program out there that allows us to share that information. And as Peter pointed out, to keep it up to date, that's the key. Those documents we have in the back room that are outdated are just as bad as a model of what format that's 10 years old that we can't open anymore. So we have to keep these things current.
So we're kind of talk a little bit about just working with different types of data. There are going to be some standard data sets that we're going to work with. So we're going to say, hey, how do we look at this data from a design perspective in Revit? How do we look at it as we start to go towards that cloud? I usually make fun of when you see the cloud appear, right? When everything came together, the angels come out, someone goes, oh, it'll be up in the cloud, it'll be fine, right? No, it doesn't work that way. Talk about what a standard database is and show you some things that we've done with that. Talk about facility management systems as a whole, and then talk about different ways and methods to start to pull this information into your system so you can make better decisions about your facilities.
So as Peter said, one of the formats that I'm more comfortable with is Revit. So I'm speaking about Revit specifically here. But again, any building information modeling software proprietary system will do the same thing. The idea here is that we have the ability to work in the proprietary software, so an RVT file, if you will. But of course, we also have the ability to export out to an open BIM format, so IFC in this case. And we have the ability to make sure that information is usable throughout the life cycle of the project. And not only can we export, we can bring that in again, using it whatever we want. Another thing that Peter's going to go into a little bit more detail going on is something like Colby, where we have the ability to start tracking our assets and our information and doing that at the beginning stages when we're working inside of that model, to do it for design, to do it for when we actually construct it. And Autodesk has some free tools that do that. It's not developed by Autodesk, so therefore, it helps the process of working our way through. That allows us to work with Colby information inside of Revit, inside of Navisworks in this case. So some very helpful information. We also have the ability, again, BIM 360, lots of other platforms out there, shameless plug like BIMTrack, that allows us to put these things in place to see what's going on. And one of the things that I'd like to point out about this particular slide, I use it often, is that I like it to look nice. So everything's in their own little silo, little container. But I think we can all agree that the amount of time we spend on design versus the amount of time we spend on operations isn't equal. So take this with the grain of salt that's intended. But as you can see, we have all of these different platforms that work together that have their own little niche inside of the design phase and the building phase, and again, take us on to operations at the end. The idea, though, is that they all work together in that cloud that Peter was giving a little jab to. But the idea is that we have this one spot, in this case, BIM 360 Docs, where all this information is available. And again, the key there is we now have the ability to share the data with all those involved, and we can pass that data on from design to construction and then on to the owners as we work our way through, whatever that platform might be.
And we're just at the beginning of seeing how that data is going to be harnessed. We have a product called IMAGINiT Clarity, works with Revit. Revit has tasks. It's a task automation engine that we work with design companies for. And we repositioned it recently when we realized that most owners didn't know how to get their data out of BIM. Okay? In this case, let me tell you, we had our Clarity product, but this was like a couple days of programming. Okay? We take the data out of the model, we put it in a database, you can report on the data. It's not a big deal. What does become very important as you think about your multiple buildings is what is in those models, back to that standard kind of that we mentioned earlier. But I want to tell you it's not that difficult, and there are like 20 products that do what Clarity does. So again, it's not special. Sorry, going backwards. In facilities management, I use a very complex term, where's my stuff? The core functions of FM, if you think about it, right, are what space or spaces or areas do I have, and what do I need to do to maintain that space for whatever feature and function it has, okay? And as we think about that, space at a database level can be broken down to building, floor, room. It's just data. From an assets perspective, you can have a unique identifier on things. We talked about a barcode earlier, okay? And that allows us to track additional assets, and then we can tie information to that. One of the 360, a part of 360 is a product called Autodesk BIM 360 Ops. It's a very simple, easy to use work order management system, or CMMS. And when I asked them, the director, hey, I'm doing this presentation, tell me what your perspective is. And she goes, ironically, most data is entered from a spreadsheet. Part of the reason is because we don't have BIM as-built as owners, right? Raise your hand if you're an owner and you have lots of BIM as-built. Raise your hand if you're an owner and your AutoCAD drawings are up to date. Forget about Revit, right? Okay. But it was interesting what she said. She said, we do a lot of stuff with spreadsheet. And she said, you know, my advice when I talk to AEC professionals is keep it simple, stupid. Don't flood the owner with a bunch of information. If you can show them day one where their assets are in their facility, it's really helpful. Wouldn't you like to know day one where your assets are and details about them? There's no reason that you shouldn't. So we're going to talk a little bit about data flows in some ways. So has anyone in the room heard COBie before, the term COBie? Okay, so I'll go over that really quick. I'm going to show some examples of BIM to a database, and I'm going to show an example of integrating some BIM data with an IWM, in this case, Archibus. I want to be clear, neither Archibus nor Revit or Specialist, just data as far as I'm concerned.
Kaboom! Just making sure you're still awake.
Also, this is where the money is. It's like that Jerry Maguire thing. When he jumps on the desk and he's screaming, show me the money. That's what an owner should be doing to their AEC professional. Conversely, the AEC professional should be coming to the owner going, I can show you the money. So COBie stands for Construction Owner Building Information Exchange. It's just a data format. There are different levels you can have it. You can have very basic information, like my facility floor. You could have complex information. What concerns me greatly about it is it's usually delivered in a spreadsheet, and then the architect thinks it's a spreadsheet. Well, God bless them, nothing wrong with them. They build beautiful buildings. I have a degree in physics. If I built buildings, they'd be square, and everything would make sense, and the world would be incredibly dull. So we just need to go back to that progression. But here's a simple example in Archibus where we're taking, and Archibus could be any system, right? Basic COBie elements, matching them to a database, and entering them into a system. The only thing that's important here is that we have consistent naming standards. Your IT department has that covered. I kind of talked about clarity before, right? So from clarity's perspective, hey, let's pull up some basic information on a room. So at a pure database example, here's something else that can be done. In this case, this will be our longest slide. This slide, by the way, is from 2014. It's ancient technology, right? We're in Revit. We can turn off and on layers. We can look at a building different ways, right? We can look at it more in two-dimensional manner that we're used to. So let's look at an example of simple space, linking this building information model with a database. In this case, it's Archibus. There's a plugin that's running inside of Revit, and look, I pulled up a window. And you can see that there are data elements in a database that are linked to this model. Also, as you look down, you can see that you've got a pull down, so you can't get bad data. Another IT process they put in there sometimes, right? Makes sense. Let's call a light bulb a light bulb. Inside Revit, this isn't rocket science. This data exists there too. In Revit, we don't call it a database field. We call it a parameter. You can set up a simple mapping from one to the other. Again, 6 years old, not rocket science, old technology. We can do this all sorts of things on top of this today, and the uses are going to keep coming. As you come along, we can also look at this from an asset perspective. So the current term, in the asset management world, everyone's talking about an EAM, right? Complete life cycle of your asset. So we can click on an asset within the model, link that to an asset management system, and start to pull up information about that. Okay, so as we go along, we pull. I'm going into my system here, and I can look at life cycle costs. I can look at details about this, and I can pull all sorts of information in to make good decisions. The other point I want to make about this slide is I love getting salesmen from different software companies that integrate in the same room because they argue about whose system the data should be in. Should the data be in the BIM? Maybe. Should the data be in the database? Maybe. They're going to be different places, and there'll be some data that's bidirectional. There'll be some that's separate. The good news is your IT's figured this out for your other systems already. Sometimes there are a lot of AEC people in the world. I got to explain to them that you guys are stressed and over budget. Under budget, right? Anyone got good budget? Raise your hand. The other thing I want to stress as we talk about this data, there's tremendous focus from the C-suite facilities because facilities are expensive. IT's caught up with you. And as we look at this, there are all sorts of ways to use this data. Want to give you a couple simple examples. In this case, I'm using Archibus to pull in BIM data together, right? Here's a floor plan. Who polylines their floor plans? Raise your hand for space data. Revit, you don't need to polyline. Darn it. I'm connecting it with a simple database. I'm doing table join. I'm then taking that data in that table join, linking it to Esri or Google Maps or something to look at it differently. Can drill down and look at data and start pulling energy metrics, right? I can look at maps differently and stacking charts. I can start, looking at my floor plans and how I arrange things. I can start looking at things in 3D and drill down into the asset and its subcomponents. And I really like this slide because this here is a point cloud, right? We have point cloud. Shoot, that's better than Revit or AutoCAD or anything. You can have an actual picture of that. And then you can start to do all sorts of complex analysis. Like in this case, we said, hey, this is a lab environment. One piece of equipment services this. What happens when it goes down? Simple data examples, 6 years old. I really should update this deck, but I don't on purpose.
So as we can see here, kind of the idea, as we saw, we're bringing this back home, we're bringing this baby in for landing, is the idea that we want to get, as Peter said, so that we're all in that AEC owner win-win category. And from the AEC side, what we need to look at is that we have the ability that we've created all this time, or we spent all this time creating this model, this living document, this data. What if we talk to the owner and say, hey, we're the ones that are willing to, for a fee, of course, keep this up to date, make sure that you have the latest and greatest in there. Keep those relationships going so that we pass that along. So think of it as a way to have a revenue stream, a way to have repeat business. We did that for that owner. They really liked it. They liked the system that we did when we were working with BIM. Let's work with them on the next project. So those are the ways that as the AEC professionals, we can start looking to take advantage of BIM to be more akin to the owners and have them reuse this over and over again.
And from an owner's perspective, this can be invaluable because you can make better decisions over time. There's an IFMA calculation. I think it's, I always mispronounce it, but it's at least 20% of all preventative maintenance is done on equipment that's under maintenance warranty. No one's tracking it. So in the end, I like Dwight Schrute. I like keep it simple, stupid, because I can explain it. I hope I didn't hurt anyone's feelings by that.
And as Peter said, as we will reiterate, it's really about those three questions. So what is the data that you need? How are we going to get it? And then how are we going to keep it up to date? Those are those three things that should become your mantra for what you want going forward. And
then the last thing, if I could just add to that, after that, go talk to your IT department. Everything's a table join because you can add data elements so you can start with a simple model.